It is Tuesday night Bible study. So we're just going to jump right into the Word. So this is a very timely message, timely word. Not that none of the word isn't timely. It is all timely. But there's just certain things at certain times that are just really appropriate. So this is a timely word, but it's also a serious word. So what we're going to be talking about tonight, the title of this is called Avoid the Very Appearance of Evil. It's a very serious thing that we need to make sure we're putting into place. So, scripture reference that we are using for this evening is 1 Thessalonians 5:22. In the Amplified Bible, it says, "Abstain from evil, shrink from it, and keep aloof from it, in whatever form or whatever kind it may be." The Voice says, "Put away from every form of evil." NLT says, "Stay away from every kind of evil." The NIV says, "Reject every kind of evil." The CEB version says, "Avoid every kind of evil." And the Young's Literal says, "From all appearance of evil, abstain." So if you notice in those different translations, the different words they use. So we've got put away every form, stay away, reject every kind, avoid every kind, abstain from all appearance of evil. In the days that we are living in, and as believers, the enemy's going to try to do whatever he can to steal, kill, destroy. So we need to make sure that we're avoiding the very appearance of evil. So as part of our Bible study, we'll start with our normal English class that we do so often. And so the word avoid. The word avoid means keep away from or stop oneself from doing something. Means contrive not to meet. But it's specifically with that definition, it means contrive not to meet someone. So avoid not meeting with someone. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in more explanation. Not go to or through a place. Keep from happening. So that's the word avoid. The word abstain means restrain oneself from doing or enjoying something. Refrain from. To choose not to do something. To refuse, reject, decline. To hold oneself back voluntarily, especially from something regarded as improper or unhealthy. It's pretty powerful definitions of these words. So then that's avoid, that's abstain. What's the word appearance? The appearance is the way that someone or something may look. Appearance is an impression given by someone or something, although this may be misleading. So think about it. We could see things one way, but that may not necessarily be what it actually is. So what does by all appearances mean? We've heard that phrase used before, to all appearances, right? So according to the way things appear or how one sees things, as is apparent to observation, to all appearances. So you could say something like, well, this individual, they seem to be a very happy, outgoing person. They seem to be, but in reality, behind the scenes, they were a different type of person. It's easy to appear one way. It's easy to put up sometimes a front one way, especially if they're being used by the enemy to get something. So, what's the word perceive mean? Perceive means to interpret or look on someone or something in a particular way or regard as. It's regarded as in a specified way, used to say how something or someone is seen or thought of. So we all have perceptions. It's all how somebody perceives a thing. And that's where we've got to be careful. Because perceptions teamed up with avoiding the very appearance of evil, that's where we've got to be careful as Christians on how we're living our everyday lives. What are we doing? Who are we doing it with? Even though, and I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but even though the action is completely innocent, by looks it may not be. And people's minds can go haywire. We've been created with vivid imaginations, okay? Very vivid imaginations. So, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He wants nothing more than trip up a Christian, to cause them to compromise their beliefs, what they know is right according to Yahweh's word, and he uses very subtle, sly ways. He's a very, very subtle devil. He's very sly in some of the things that he does. Makes things look really good, maybe even tries to make it look like it's from God, and in actuality it's not. He can make things appear that they are good and from God, but in actuality, they are the opposite. They are bad, and sometimes when referring to individuals, you ever heard the term wolves in sheep clothing? Okay? There's two sides to this avoiding the very appearance of evil. It's how the devil can use a situation or a person to try to entice a believer or throw them off. But then we also have a very important part to play in that, to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a position to have something wrongly seen, to have something misinterpreted. Things or people are not always as they appear to be. He started way back in the Garden of Eden when he told Eve to look at the fruit of the tree and see that it was good. What we heard Mom say quite often, don't even look at the fruit of the tree to see that it is good. Don't even look. If you know that it could even just be a slight thing that would start to pull on you, don't even look at it. And that's what Eve's challenge was. She looked at the tree, but then she had an enemy right there. Well, did God say? Did God really say? A subtle, sly enemy. And in that situation, she was not putting into effect avoiding the very appearance of evil. So, avoiding the very appearance of evil when things are looking good. I don't know why, for some reason, the example, I was thinking it was an example to use, and it was like, first example that dropped into me was desserts, okay? Now, I'm not even really a dessert eater. We eat dessert on Friday nights for Shabbat, and sometimes I don't even eat them till like 2-3 days later, but think about it, desserts, okay? The desserts are made to look good, most of them, okay? Depends on if you're experimenting with something, and maybe sometimes they don't. That was supposed to be a cake, and it turned out to be a pancake, But, desserts are meant to look good, and they do. Think about like if you walk into, well, maybe in our former days, okay? When you walked into a bakery, and they've got the cakes and the cookies and all this stuff, and things looked so good, and they smell so good. Well, when you think when something looks good and smells good and tastes good, it must be good for you. We have all those avenues of good, okay? Looks good, smells good, tastes good. But in actuality, it's very bad for you. So in that aspect, what seems to look good is actually very harmful to your health, very harmful to your body, especially if you're the type that just indulges in all types of stuff like that. So I'm going to read this to you from Rick Renner, and his thing that he did, a devotion, is called "Abstain from All Appearances of Evil." Now, it was interesting because I had pulled this up, and I had already done my Bible study part, and then Holy Spirit had dropped into me last night. Rick Renner did a thing on avoiding the very appearance of evil. Go look it up. So I did. I looked it up and printed it out, and I was like, oh, it lines up with what I had. But then somebody that I was listening to after the fact, what she was saying actually lined up with mine and with Rick Renner's. So it was just like all this confirmation everywhere type of thing. So he references 1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from all appearance of evil. When I was getting started in the ministry, God blessed me with an opportunity to serve as associate pastor to an older man of God who taught me many important principles for my life and ministry. One of the most important principles he taught me, one that I now require every leader who works in our ministry, is the necessity of abstaining from all appearance of evil. The necessity of avoiding every appearance of evil. When I first heard this pastor's rules, I thought they were a little overboard. For instance, men in the pastoral staff could not meet alone with members of the opposite sex, counsel a woman alone behind closed doors, or ride alone in a car with a woman other than one's wife. I thought these types of rules made life very inconvenient, but the pastor was very strong on never doing anything that gave a wrong impression or that opened a door for criticism or accusation. Okay? Avoid the very appearance of evil. We teach that to our children. We have certain rules here in this building where our children are concerned, and it's to avoid the very appearance of evil. But it's also not to give the enemy an opportunity to have come through an open door. Yes. I've been in the ministry many years and know of numerous times when believers have been accused of inappropriate behavior. The behavior was sometimes real and at other times imagined, but the opportunity for accusation was almost always the result of carelessness in keeping certain boundaries. You know, you can get too familiar sometimes, you can get too comfortable, and when you do that, you can become careless and just think you forget what your border was or your boundary or whatever. Even though everything's completely innocent, there's nothing that's wrong that's going on, but you get careless and something appears to be a certain way, and it gives the opportunity for the enemy to strike. So now I agree wholeheartedly that there is great wisdom in adhering to restrictions like the ones my senior pastor required in my early days of ministry. By taking this cautious approach, men and women of God are able to steer clear of insinuations and accusations. Now he's talking about men and women of God, all believers. Doesn't matter if you're a member in a congregation or you're a leader in a church, he's talking about all Christians. This, however, I just got ahead of myself again. This, however, applies to every believer who cares about the integrity of his or her witness. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to our witness. It comes down to our testimony. We all in here have got a witness. We've got a testimony, and we've got to protect that. We've all got a reputation that needs to be protected. So the verse that my senior pastor used as the basis for his rules, and the verse I use in my own ministry to provide guidance to our team on such issues was 1 Thessalonians 5:22. In this verse, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Abstain from all appearance of evil." Paul began by saying, abstain. The word abstain is from the Greek word apeko. This word means to deliberately withdraw from, to stay away from, to put distance between oneself and something else, or to intentionally abstain. The word apeko is also used in 1 Peter 2:11, where Peter wrote, "Dear beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul." In this case, the word abstain, apeko, means to deliberately refrain from something. Hence, it could be translated, I urge you to refrain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. The implication is that believers should put distance between themselves and temptations of the flesh and the soul. You know, flee anything that may seem like it could get you to trip up. You know, you got the story of Joseph. You know, what did Joseph do? He had Potiphar's wife. He fled from the situation. But in actuality, Joseph, he was totally right in fleeing from that situation, and that's what he should have done. But in actuality, Joseph brought that on himself. He brought that false accusation on himself by not being careful. He knew that Potiphar's wife all along had this intentions to have him, and he still went to the house or whatever it was. He still went there. He still went there alone, knowing that she had evil intentions. He could have avoided that entire situation from happening if he had not even been there to begin with. Now, nothing happened. He was a righteous, godly man. He fled. But if he just had avoided the situation from the very beginning, it would have saved him that entire accusation of what had happened to him. There are other examples of the word apeko in the New Testament that also demonstrate how this word depicts some type of distance between objects. For example, in Luke 7:6, the word apeko is used to describe the physical distance between Yeshua and the house of the centurion. I thought that was interesting. In Matthew 15:8 and Mark 7:6, the word apeko is used to describe human hearts that are hardened and therefore distant and far from God. Okay? What happens when you're just doing your own thing and you have Holy Spirit trying to warn you stuff and warn you stuff? When you get to a point where you say to yourself, I can handle it, should be a red flag. Especially when counsel is telling you otherwise, godly, biblical counsel is telling you otherwise, and you're in a place, well, I can handle it, that should be a red flag. In Acts 15:20, the word apeko is used when James, the leader of the Jerusalem church, gave instructions that the new Gentile believers should abstain from food offered to idols, from sexual immorality, from the meat of strangled animals, and from the consumption of raw blood. In that verse, the word apeko is so strong that it makes a demand on the new Gentile believers to withdraw from and permanently terminate their contact with these things. It is actually a command to refrain, to desist, to discontinue, and to terminate any further contact with them. And it calls for a permanent halt to the practice of allowing such contact. This is some strong stuff. It's like, terminate it. Terminate it. Just, what does terminate mean? Well, we could get into some things about terminating stuff, okay? Terminate's a strong word. Keeping this in mind, we know that when Paul told us, abstain from all appearance of evil, he was strongly urging you and me to put distance. Why? Why is Yahweh so strong in this? It's to protect us. It's to protect our destiny. We have had too many casualties. We have had too many people go down because they weren't avoiding the very appearance of evil. But then the very appearance of evil in some cases was able to strike. It was able to strike and take a hold of them because they weren't avoiding the very appearance of evil. This Greek word apeko demands that we do not allow even the smallest hint of inappropriate behavior or any act that could be misinterpreted or viewed as being immoral or unethical. There is no doubt about it. The word apeko calls for extreme caution and vigilance. Why is it that Mom always says, make sure you're in the right place, at the right time, doing the right thing with the right people? Why is she always saying that? So strongly in saying that? Because she knows the dangers of being in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong people, doing the wrong thing. And forget the wrong thing. Okay, you could even be with the wrong people, and that could give somebody else a false impression of what you're doing. You could be hanging with a crowd that none of them are believers. They're doing their thing, okay? And you're the one Christian, well, supposed to be the one Christian in the midst of them. And someone else comes along and sees that. And even though it may be totally innocent, you're just there. You don't believe the same as them or partaking in the same thing. But because you're there, it's kind of like, I don't know if this is a bad example, but it's kind of like being an accomplice to a crime. You're an accomplice to what's going on. And it's, even though you're innocent, you're not doing anything, but you're with the wrong people, and it's creating a wrong impression. The word from is the Greek word apo, which means away. However, because the word apeko had already been used, meaning to put distance between yourself and some other thing, it means the word apo was really not needed, unless Paul intended to place a very strong emphasis on this point. By adding the word apo, it makes the point abundantly clear that believers should not only put distance between themselves and what is obviously evil, but they must also put a great deal of distance between themselves and whatever fits this description, even in appearance. It's kind of like the lines along the lines, not kind of, it is, when we're talking about Halloween on Saturday. Jordan and I were talking about this, I think it was earlier, maybe it was Jordan and I think it was, about even with Halloween. You avoid the very appearance of evil. Even Christians, we said it on Sabbath. Christians have no place, no part in participating in Halloween. You avoid that to anything, especially now knowing how bad, how sinister, the things that actually go on Halloween night, how real it is when you have, witches and satanic priests and all this stuff. You avoid the very appearance of evil, and Halloween is evil. You've got a Christian family that has, they carve out pumpkins and have them little candles inside of it placed out on their deck. That's not avoiding the appearance of evil. Okay, so even with that, you need to be avoiding the very appearance of evil. The word appearance is in the Greek is eidos, a word that is only used 5 times in the New Testament, but depicts an outward form, visible appearance, a likeness, or resemblance of something. Therefore, Paul was telling us, it doesn't matter what you think or what you know to be true. What matters is what appears to be true in the eyes of others. Okay, that's where the importance is. Even though you know it's true, it's innocent, it really doesn't matter that you know that. It matters what someone else is thinking. Because you got the devil who's roaming around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And if he could grab something to use it to falsely accuse you of something, to try to tarnish your reputation, and that has gone on way too much. But that's why we as believers, we need to stand on guard. We need to be careful about these things and making sure we're avoiding the very appearance of evil. Therefore, Paul is telling us, it doesn't matter what you think or what you know to be true. What matters is what appears to be true in the eyes of others. Even if there is a small chance that someone may mistake your actions as evil, or if what you do even resembles something evil or wrong, you need to stay as far away from it as you possibly can. You just got to stay far away from it. What makes this even more serious is the fact that this word evil, the Greek word porneros, is often used in the Greek Septuagint version of the Old Testament to describe actions that are ultimately damaging to a person's testimony and reputation. There is no doubt that Paul was telling us that we must do everything in our ability to put a lot of distance between ourselves and anything that would bring harm or injury to our reputation or to our godly witness in front of other people. You know, it's really hard to restore your reputation once someone has said something someone says something about you that's not true, or you're doing something innocent but it appears to others that it's not. It's very hard to restore a reputation. We tell that story about the person that goes to the rabbi and says, about he's talking evil about somebody and you're tarnishing their reputation. And how do you restore that? How do you get that back? And he tells him, go get the pillow. Go get that feather pillow and open it up and throw all the feathers. Now go get every single one of those feathers. It's impossible. You can't collect all those feathers. Just like it's impossible that you can't redeem what you did to somebody's reputation or what you did to yourself. It's very, very hard. And once... it's hard once we're human. We have thoughts and stuff. And a lot of times when you hear something about someone that they've done that's been wrong and everything, and they've been proven that they were innocent, it's still hard to get that original accusation out of your mind. That sticks. That sticks. And the devil knows that. So think about it. How many people do you know who did something that they thought was all right to do, but other people saw their action and misinterpreted it, and as a result, it stained their reputation? By using common sense and from refraining from situations where you could be accused, you have to put distance between yourself and potential accusations. Have you ever heard a rumor about a preacher who wrongly used money that was intended for the work of the ministry? The truth may be that the minister never did anything wrong at all with those funds, but because his actions gave a wrong impression to people who were watching, what he did resulted in a damaged testimony. Preachers can avoid these types of accusations by determining never to touch ministry funds personally and by establishing a bookkeeping system that demands accountability. Just by using common sense and choosing to refrain from activities that might give a mistaken impression, those in the ministry can put great distance between themselves and suspicious-looking situations. In so doing, there'll never be room for accusation that they may misuse ministry funds or participate in any questionable activity or behavior. I was listening to a lady talk on that last night, and she was saying how her pastor had come to her, and she, helps handle the finances of the church and paying out bills and stuff like that. And the pastor said to her, you're allowed to sign checks. You're allowed to sign checks, but you're not allowed to make them out. Now think about it. Okay, you're allowed to sign them, but then you got to give it to me to make it out. Was that pastor doing that to be not trusting of the person or to be a jerk or whatever? No. The pastor was doing that to protect her. Because you got an ability to sign a check, by illustration only, That could look like to somebody, oh, they might be making checks out to themselves. They have the power. They could pay to the order of so-and-so, $500. But the pastor was protecting her from the very appearance of evil, to keep her covered. As I said, this principle of refraining from every appearance of evil isn't pertinent only to ministers. It applies to every believer who wants to maintain a godly reputation. The fact is, if your testimony in the eyes of others is important to you, you must make the decision to withdraw from, refrain from, desist from, discontinue, and permanently terminate any action that gives the appearance of evil. Although this may require a new set of rules for your life, you will be taking vital steps toward preserving your testimony and godly reputation. How much is your reputation and the reputation of the Holy One you represent worth to you? If you want to maintain a good name and testimony in front of others, you must refrain from any language, action, or contact that gives the appearance of evil. And this is not just a suggestion, it is the commandment of God found in 1 Thessalonians 5:22. He's saying, stay away from every form of evil. By understanding the Greek words in this verse, we can interpret 1 Thessalonians 5:22 to read, you need to terminate contact with any place, action, language, or relationship that gives people the impression that you are doing something wrong. It doesn't matter what you think is acceptable. What matters is what other people perceive. So put a great deal of distance between yourself and anything you are doing that people could misinterpret and that could thereby stain your reputation. So many people have forfeited their testimony because they didn't use their heads and think about how their actions might be perceived by others. Perception is often reality in the eye of the beholder. And it's not necessarily that the perception's wrong, it's how the person saw it. That's what it appeared to them to be. Even if you know that you're doing nothing wrong at all, the fact remains that people don't see your heart, they see your actions. That's what people go off of. They don't see your heart, but they see your actions. If they see you do something that appears immoral or unethical, you will likely be judged by what they perceive. If you're like me, your highest desire is to glorify Yeshua in this life in all you say and do. That's why our hearts can agree with what Paul says in this verse, that it's always best to abstain from all appearance of evil because we are his representatives on this earth. That's pretty strong. That's very powerful the way Rick Renner puts that out and stuff. But it should give a lot of food for thought and should make you analyze and think different things from now on. Like I said, what may seem totally innocent to you, and it is completely innocent, but someone else might not see it that way. And even to kick it up a notch, in the days that we're in and how much the devil is trying to just wipe out believers, he's going to purposely send somebody to look to see if they can get you on something. He's going to purposely send a wolf to see if they can stir up trouble, to see, whoa, they did that, so now I'm going to go plant this false thing and say this about them that they did, and that just stirs up a whole other realm of stuff you have to go through where you shouldn't have had to go through it to begin with if you had just handled the situation correctly from the beginning. Don't even put yourself in situations like that you may have to fight. Putting yourself in certain situations can open the door for accusations to be brought against you. And that's why we need to be very aware of our actions and careful of what situations we could be placing ourselves in. We got to get as far away from evil as we can. And it's not just always our actions. Sometimes people can misinterpret things, if we're careless. If we're careless in our actions, if we're careless in our word, our speech. This may sound ridiculous, but I'll even think to myself, if I'm out somewhere, all right, a good example, Cassie and I were laughing about this a couple weeks ago, but in all honesty, it's true. I was honestly concerned with it. All right, so I drive around in a car that has a license plate that says, praise God, okay? We're on TV. People recognize Jordan and I out in the public and stuff like that. We have different people come up to us and comment and know, whatever. All right, so people know us from preaching at Faith Christian Church and stuff like that. So on top of it, drive around in the car that says, praise God. So Kathy and I a couple weeks ago had to go to Santander Bank. I'm not even thinking, I just don't, I'm not in the world. I don't, just like what I don't think Halloween, so I wasn't thinking about walking to that silly store. I was not thinking this. And Kathy was the one. So I'm going to Santander Bank, and there's cars parked right out in front of the bank. So I'm pulling up to park into another empty spot. And Kathy's like, did you notice what you just parked in front of? And I'm like, oh gosh. And it's one of the cannabis places. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's all I need is for somebody to drive by and be, isn't that Sherry? Why is she at the cannabis place? And her and I were like, I so quickly moved that car. I was like, I don't care if I have to park in the back of the building and walk, okay? It's like, but in all seriousness, that's the thought I had. Here's my car parked in front of the marijuana place. And somebody that knows me goes driving by, and it's like, whoa, why is Sherry getting a joint? It's like, things that rough, But it was like, gosh. But I said that thought, okay, that's avoiding the very appearance of evil. Because I did not know that. And the devil, knowing how he is, could have on purpose sent somebody who decided they needed to go to Santander Bank to make a deposit and look over and be like, hey, that's Sherry's car over there at the pot place. Oh, let's go and tell Site, hey, did you know that Sherry down at Faith Christian Church goes to the pot place down on... I was like, no, I was in the bank, okay? Just didn't even need to go that. That was a situation of avoiding a situation from the very start, okay? So I did. I quickly moved that car, and Cassie and I were laughing about it because we were like, oh, gosh, that's all we needed. But it's like, no, avoid the very appearance of evil. Okay, avoid the very appearance of evil. And I've thought of that at times going down John Fitch Highway and stopping one time at D'Angelo's to get a salad. This was a couple years ago. Well, what's right next to D'Angelo's? And me, I shouldn't say I don't think, but I just I'm like, I think, but it's just like D'Angelo's was parked. So I was like, I'm going to go next door, and it's the liquor store. Okay, and I was like, so I'm pulling in, it's like, I don't need that, for goodness sakes. Somebody drives by, and isn't that Sherry's car at the liquor store? Things are really rough, okay? But it's like, avoid the very appearance of evil. So it's like, in all seriousness, especially in situations like that was totally innocent. It was totally innocent that I pulled up in front of the marijuana store, not even knowing what it was. Cassie explained it to me, but I was kind of like, well, how do you know what it is, But, not even knowing, and it's like, but there's a totally innocent situation. It was an innocent situation. I was going to the bank. Totally innocent situation. But how would it have looked to somebody else if they had driven by and saw, praise God, in front of, praise God, out in front of the marijuana place. Yeah, we're really praising and joyous and woohoo, all right? Just avoid the very appearance of evil. So, something that can be completely innocent can sometimes make the wrong impression. You want to make a good impression and not do something that would accuse people, that would not use people to question. You don't ever want to have a situation where you're causing somebody to question what you're doing. How does what you're doing appear to someone else? So we need to think of that too. How is what am I doing appear to somebody? If I'm in the store, even like being in stores, you got to be careful. It's like, certain section, I guess for me it would be like, don't stand in front of the chocolate section, okay? Because it's like, that would appear. But, which I have been guilty at times, okay? Especially if they have their little lilies displayed there on the bottom part of it. But even in some supermarket, Hannaford's has the wine section and stuff. It's like, well, even if you're walking through the wine section to get to the dairy. It was like, well, you don't have to walk through the wine section to get to the dairy. You could go around the other way. But what if you just happen to be walking through and someone's like, oh, so-and-so was in the wine section. No, it was not in the wine section. I was walking through the wine section, okay? But, avoid the very appearance of evil. So how does what you're doing appear to someone else? We got to be protecting our reputation. As believers, as sons and daughters of the Most High God, as the one who we're supposed to be representing every single day, we have got to guard ourselves. We have got to protect our reputations because it reflects on Him. How can we profess that we're a son and daughter of the Most High God, that we're a Christian, and we live by the Word and stuff, if we're not doing everything that it takes to protect our reputation so that someone can't try to falsely accuse us of something. So that it's not in a situation where it could appear, even though it's innocent, but it could appear that we're doing something that's not innocent. So we got to be above board. Be careful that you know what you are doing and think it through to the end. You know, situations will come up, the end, you know, and the devil will throw things, you know, especially relationships. You know, especially in a relationship, you know, be careful that you think it through to the end and you know that it's of God and that you seek godly counsel on it and that you follow it. That's the big key, to follow it. Because like it was in the book of Judges, the book of Judges, it says, when you do right in your own eyes, it never goes well. And that's the truth. When you do right in your own eyes, it never goes well. Like I was just saying, well, I can handle it. You know, I can handle that. I can handle walking through the lint outlet, you know, no challenge. I can handle it. You know, I can handle walking through, not me personally, but somebody else might, you know, I can handle going into the bar to minister to so-and-so, and they were redeemed from alcoholism 20 years ago, okay? You got to be avoiding the very appearance of evil and being careful about knowing what you're doing, and you got to think it through to the end. Don't be with the wrong people. I said this at the beginning. Don't be with the wrong people. And you know what? It's scriptural. It's scriptural. We said these scriptures on Sabbath, so I'm going to remind us of them. 2 Corinthians 6:14 in the Amplified says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. That does not just refer to, you know, a man and a woman, a marriage. It says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Do not make mismated alliances with them or come under a different yoke with them, inconsistent with your faith. For what partnership have right living and right standing with God with iniquity and lawlessness? Or how can light have fellowship with darkness? Stay away from the wrong people. Avoid the very appearance of evil. Don't be unequally yoked. The voice says, don't develop partnerships with those who are not followers of Yeshua's teachings. For what real connection can exist between righteousness and rebellion? How can light participate in darkness? I'm going to read the message again. I read it on Sabbath, but I think the message just was so impactful the way they put it. Don't become partners with those who reject God. How can you make a partnership out of right and wrong? That's not partnership, that's war. Is light best friends with dark? Does Yeshua go strolling with the devil? Do trust and mistrust hold hands? Who would think of setting up pagan idols in God's holy temple? But that is exactly what we are, each of us a temple in whom God lives. God himself put it this way, I'll live in them, move into them. I'll be their God and they'll be my people. So leave the corruption and compromise. Leave it for good, says God. Don't link up with those who will pollute you. Okay? Avoid the very appearance of evil. Do not link up with those who will pollute you. I want you all for myself. I'll be a father to you. You'll be my sons and daughters to me. The word of the Master God. And then the NLT says, don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? Right? Avoid the very appearance of evil. It's a serious thing, especially in these days that we live in. Because the devil has let all hell loose. He really has. And we have got to make sure we're standing on guard. We've got to make sure that we are not with the wrong people. And like I said at the beginning of this, people think things. They just instantly, they see, think, okay? Sometimes see, think, poof, out the mouth it comes, and it's not even true. They see and think. They go off of what they're seeing, but in a lot of times, it's not even the way it actually is. It's not accurate. It's not truthful. So people think things. That can affect our testimony. If we're not avoiding the appearance of evil, it can affect our testimony. So by illustration only, I am parked in front of the marijuana place, and somebody goes by and sees my car sitting there, and then they come walking through these doors, say at an OFT, and I start witnessing to them about something or start sharing my testimony with them, and they're thinking, well, wait a minute, I saw your car over in the parking lot, and I wasn't. I was in the bank. And I don't know that they saw me because they didn't say anything, But they're not taking my testimony. They're thinking, whoa, 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 you're talking one thing, but that's not how you're living, which is not true at all. I was in the bank the whole time. It wasn't in that little place there or whatever. So we need to be fleeing from situations. As soon as you even know that it does not taste right, smell right, look right, don't even go near it. Don't even go near it. Like Joseph, he shouldn't even have gone there. He knew all along that Potiphar's wife wanted him. Should have not even been there. But he was careless. He was sloppy. And we got to make sure that we're not sloppy. We have to have standards. We have to have strict borders. Because in actuality, it only takes one time. It only takes one time to damage your reputation. It only takes one time to damage your testimony. It only takes one time for you to become sloppy, for you to think, oh, well, it's, get careless. Well, it's okay, whatever, nothing's going to happen. It takes that one time for you to do that. And the enemy is just waiting right there to strike. He's just waiting right there to accuse you of something, to make some type of accusation, to say something, And that's why we've got to be so, so careful. We've got to have standards. We've got to have strict borders. In all actuality, appearances matter. Appearances very much matter. We have got to be so on guard on how things are appearing to be. Because we know, as the Bible thinks, not all things are as they appear. And we have to make sure that we're not part of that. Not all things are not as they appear, okay? But appearances, they matter. They matter very much so. So the last scripture I'm going to use is in Hebrews 2:1. And appearances matter. We have to be extra, extra careful. I'd heard the Greek word on how to say be extra careful, because in the Greek words for be extra careful is just so powerful in the way you say them. I practiced for a while and was like, forget this. I can't even say the Greek in this. I listened and re-listened to the woman. I was like, she's got this down packed. I'm like, yeah, no, forget it. I'm not going to even try to say it in the Greek. But be extra careful. In the days we are in, we've got to be extra careful. We have got to avoid the very appearance of evil. So in Hebrews 2:1, we just came out of this whole time of the pandemic and people in lockdown, and this world has gone just just crazy. And all this stuff is happening in the economy and the government, and people going wacko, and this is happening here, and this is happening there, and this person's doing that, and just things crazy, crazy, crazy. And the devil used the opportunity these last couple years to target the church. He used it as an opportunity to go at Christians. And why? You're in lockdown. Try to stop the assembling together of people, okay? And he tried to stop families from getting together. The whole ridiculous thing about you got to stay home on Thanksgiving. You can't even go to your family. Yeah, right, okay? So much that the enemy tried to do, and the pressure and the stress that he was bombarding people with. And unfortunately, during that time, with Christians, it was causing, especially now right in this day in November 2022, some Christians have gotten in a place where they find themselves fighting wavering. They find themselves drifting, okay? And we, as sons and daughters of the Most High God, need to make sure that we're standing strong. We need to make sure, like I said, we're being very, very careful. And not to drift, not to waver, because that's what the devil wants to try to use. All the things that he threw of weariness and tiredness, those things can cause an individual to start to waver, to start to drift, to start to be like, I give up. None of this is even worth it type of thing. All right, but Hebrews 2:1 says, since all this is true, we ought to pay much closer attention than ever to the truths that we have heard, lest in any way we drift past them and slip away. For if the message given through angels, the law spoken by them to Moses, was authentic and proved sure, and every violation and disobedience received an appropriate, just, and adequate penalty, how shall we escape appropriate retribution if we neglect and refuse to pay attention to such a great salvation? For it was declared at first by the Lord, and it was confirmed to us and proved to be real and genuine by those who personally heard him speak. So it says we need to pay much closer attention than ever to the truth. We need to pay much closer attention than ever to the word of Yahweh. Why? So that we do not drift, that we do not slip away. In drifting, the only thing you have to do to drift is nothing. Think about it. The only thing you have to do to drift is nothing. Just do nothing and you're going to drift, okay? And I was shared with Kelsey and a couple other people about this lady that I was listening to. She was talking about something else, but she started to touch on the avoid the very appearance of evil. She had a little bit in there of some examples she was using, but she was talking about drifting. And she was talking about how we got to be careful, so careful that we're not wavering or not drifting. And she used this example of her and her husband. They have a sailboat, and they were out sailing. And she's from Australia, but she lives in California. She has a church in California. Interestingly about her, she has this big ministry in rescuing human trafficking. She's part of this whole human trafficking thing. And so she's very much involved in that, has this organization that's rescuing people from being trafficked and everything. And so she was talking about being in the sailboat with her husband, and so she was laying there, and he had said to her, okay, throw out the anchor. You need to throw out the anchor. And she's like, I'm interesting, because I thought, what? I'm pretty sure this is what she said, but she's like, I'm sun cooking. And I'm like, sun cooking? Like, what is sun cooking? I'm like, oh, sunbathing. She means she's sunbathing. Sun cooking? Yeah, I guess you are cooking in the sun, okay. But I'm busy sun cooking. And he's like, throw out the anchor. I need you to throw out the anchor so that we're not moving. So she's like, oh, I'm busy sun cooking. But she gets up and throws the anchor out and then goes back to do what she does. And I don't know if like she fell asleep or whatever, or just her and her husband aren't paying attention because they thought they put their anchor down. So they thought they were anchored in something. And then all of a sudden, a little bit later, boom, they actually were drifting, and they drifted into somebody else's boat. Now, it didn't sound like anything really had happened, but they thought they were anchored in something when they weren't. And because they weren't anchored, they drifted and bumped somebody else's boat. So we need to make sure, to help us to avoid the very appearance of evil, that we're anchored in this, that we're anchored in Yeshua. You know, and you got to make sure that your anchor goes all the way down. In this situation, one thing to throw the anchor out, but then she didn't follow through to make sure that it penetrated and that it did what it was supposed to do to cause them not to drift. We need to make sure that we're so anchored in this word, so rooted in it, that it helps us not to cause to drift. So in ending, we need to break off and detest from doing anything that would give the impression of evil to people who are looking at our lives from the outside. We're all being watched, okay? We're being watched by people. We're being watched by the enemy. You know, Mom says it all the time. You never know who's watching you. I've had situations where someone's come up to me and said something, and I was like, I didn't even know you were there. I never even saw you. I didn't even realize you saw me, you know? But people are always watching. Somebody is always watching you. We have to have a fuller realization of the great impact our actions can have on our reputation and on other people. This doesn't impact us. It impacts our family, but it impacts this church. Okay, it impacts our church family. So we have to have a much deeper, fuller revelation of that. We have to be aware of doing things that could be misconstrued, misunderstood, or misinterpreted. We need to make sure we're putting safeguards in our life to help us to abstain from all appearances of evil from this point forward. And this is what we've got to get solidified in us, is to abstain from every appearance of evil. But to be wise also to the fact that the enemy will try to use people to come at us, to entice us into something that's not of God. He may have it look like that it's from God. Oh, it looks good. You know that term. It may look good, but is it God? And we have a really sly enemy out there that is trying to mess up believers, that is trying to slip them off of their path, off of their destiny. And we've got to make sure we're staying solid. We're staying hooked up. We're staying anchored to this word, that we're staying anchored to any biblical counsel that's given to us. You know, even if you don't agree with it, when you do it, you're submitted, okay? But if you're not agreeing to it and you're not doing it, you're not submitted. And in these days now, you've got to make sure you're submitted. Because like I said at the beginning, we have an enemy that is roaming around like a roaring lion, looking to whom he can devour. But in this camp, he might as well move on, because there's nobody in this camp that he is going to be able to devour, because we are all putting into practice avoiding the very appearance of evil. Amen. Well, thank you for all of you joining us out on Facebook. I hope that you got something out of this, and we will see you on Sabbath at 11 a.m.